Welcome, blessings. The clip you are about to watch is an excerpt from my recent Return of the Priestess series. This year was a little different than other years. It was a journey of 3 days of deep dive into different topics. Now, before we get into the clip itself, I just wanted to quickly share with you an opportunity and an invitation for those who resonate. We are living in such extraordinary times right now, and I know, and you may resonate and feel this as well. There are many who feel the quickening and feel called to step into their spiritual gifts in a more powerful, more accelerated, more extended way. And right now, up until the 19th of June, 2023, the doors are open for my 13 Moon Priestess Training and Initiation program called Mother Spirit. This is a very deep dive, small group, immersive, intimate experience of sisterhood. It's for women who are on the path of sacred feminine leadership. Whether you are experienced or new to the path doesn't matter as much as your devotion to being a blessing in this world, to being the love you wish to see in this world, and to cultivating your sacred gifts, whether that be healing tools and more modalities, or simply the capacity to hold a frequency of love during times of accelerated chaos and stress, to bring those to the next level and to do it in a container of sisterhood. Recently I hosted a retreat with there were 9 sisters, and one of the sort of prophetic things that emerged from my mouth was to feel safe in sisterhood is a sacred blessing indeed. And that is the quality and nature of Mother Spirit. Again, this is a small group container for women who feel the call to their sacred ministries, their sacred leadership in some way, shape, or form. So if you are interested, you can find the link below. I will tell it to you here right now. It is returnofthepriestess.com/Mother Spirit. This is a course of study, a journey, a deep dive experience that is by application and interview. So you can rest assured you will be in a very safe container if this is something you feel to join. So again, Mother Spirit, 13 Moon Priestess Training and Initiation. You can go to returnofthepriestess.com/Mother Spirit. Check the link below. And now please enjoy this excerpt from this year's Return of the Priestess series. Thank you so much.
So, trusting ourselves as we embody our deepest truths is our theme today. Oh, I can stop the audio share. Okay. Trusting ourselves. We are, and many of you may know this, particularly those of you who are astrologers or dabble in astrology, we are moving out of the age of Pisces. One of the signatures of Pisces is the savior. So being saved comes from outside of ourselves. And we're moving into the age of the people, power to the people, you could say, or energy with the collective. And that's the age of Aquarius. Now, all ages, all aspects astrologically, and this is not an astrological talk, I'm just doing the big picture frame up here. All ages have their shadow and light. So there are many beautiful things about the age of Pisces, and many challenging things about the age of Aquarius. But we are at a sort of macro level, we are shifting from seeking outside of ourselves for salvation, for wisdom, for knowledge, for what to follow, who to trust, to a movement to our own collective and inner knowing and trusting. So there's so many places I can go with this. I have an outline, but I don't necessarily always feel that that's the way to go. So let me just tune in here. For many, for at least 2,000 years, the world, as we have known it, is set up with conditioning us to look outside of ourselves for answers. again, that harkens to the age of Pisces, but it could be longer than that. I mean, you could look to things like the Old Testament and many other things, looking outside the self, particularly in the Western world, not so much in the East, but in the Western world, looking outside the self for answers. And I see often those of us who are working our light, so to speak, who are the priestesses, starseeds, and light workers of this time. It's like we're straddling two worlds where we've got one foot in the old world that we were born into and probably spent a bunch of incarnations going through. So there's deep indoctrination, there's soul fragmentation, there's old trauma, there's all that stuff that we want to clean up and transmute. And then we have this one foot into what we see on the timeline of Earth as a future, but what is really the light of the divine, the awakening, the illumination of the realization of who we truly are as divine beings. And so it's a process, and everybody's at a different place in this journey of really going like from 2 feet in 3D, we'll just call it 3D, 5D for argument's sake here, to bringing one foot over. I should do it this way, because the way you're looking, it would be, no, that's right. To stepping 5D with one, and then kind of going back and forth, and to eventually going all the way into the trust. And one of the ways that I've seen this in my work, because I did used to do business coaching, and I still work with so many spiritual women, many of whom want to bring forward their gifts in the form of some kind of business, is, and I went through this was my journey as well. A part of me knowing that trusting my own guidance was key, and trusting the divine, that if I follow my gifts and I follow my excitement and I follow what brings me passion and joy, I will be provided for, or as I like to say, Mother will provide. And then the 3D part of me going, yeah, but you gotta make a living. Why don't you go get a part-time job? All of the 3D pieces still pulling us. So that's one place I see it. And the other place I see it is where, and again, I'm speaking from my own experience as well as working with clients and just sister friend conversations and brother friend conversations. The feeling of knowing something and then not trusting it. Because again, we're straddling two totally different kinds of consciousnesses here. It's not just, it's not just, we're going to have free energy one day, and the structures of the physical structures of our world will be different, and the old corrupted governments are going to collapse, and big pharma and big this and big that are going to be gone. Yeah, that. But why? Because the consciousness will have changed. So as we straddle these two worlds, these two forms of consciousness, trusting ourselves to embody our deepest truths, to trust our deepest truths, is it's a learning process. It's like we have to crawl before we can walk, and we have to ride training wheels before we can ride two wheels. Usually, not always, but usually. So our intuitive abilities, and this is part of the straddling, our intuitive abilities are coming back on. And some of you here, I know, have highly honed intuitive ability. So it's not like it's coming back on. You're already full there. So you may be already bringing that other leg into 5D, so to speak. The thing is, as the intuition comes, it's not like it was ever gone. It's just that we were blocked from being aware of it. The intuition, our higher guidance, whether you call that our spirit guides, our higher self, our monad, whatever, angels, whatever you want to say, they are transmitting guidance to us all the time, based on the soul's journey, that the physical journey we intended by our souls to help navigate us, right? But we have been so shut off from that because of the world, the deep 3D matrix consciousness we were born into. And so we've been disconnected from it. So we're learning. It's not so much that it's coming back online. It's like we're clearing away. And to me, it's represented up here by the crown chakra. For you, maybe it's the heart. It doesn't matter what. The idea is that we're clearing it away. And then we have to learn to trust it. So we have to start with our training wheels. And I never thought of this really before until I was preparing this talk, but I feel like some of the tools that we use for insight are kind of, you can use the analogy of training wheels on a bicycle. So these are tools that support us in checking what we know as we build confidence and trust in ourselves. So I'm talking about tarot. I'm talking about oracle cards. I'm talking about using a pendulum. I'm talking about kinesiology. I'm not necessarily talking about astrology. That's a whole nother kind of thing. Again, not going to get into it here, at least the astrology I do. So those are, they're literal practical tools that used to be seen as woo-woo, right? That we can use to help cultivate our own trust in the guidance that we are receiving. Because as we trust our guidance more, then we can, this was a transmitted message. We can embody our deepest truths. What do I mean by that? Well, I have to now reflect on that because, again, it was transmitted through me. We can walk in the world aligned with our guidance rather than aligning with the latest external directive or groupthink or ideologies or whatever. So embodiment in this sense is really about, I trust and know my own guidance so well that I walk the path along, I live in congruence with what I know to be true for myself. So these beautiful tools, and I mean, think about those of us who are older, you probably remember before there were tarot cards at every bookstore, right? Now, I mean, they're infinite, the number of tarot cards you can find. And I sometimes share this story. I have even come across, and I should have bought them, but then again, I don't really need them, a deck of gummy bear tarot deck. I mean, like any possible tarot deck you could imagine exists probably. So why is that? Is it just because it's a trend and people make money? Yeah. But why tarot cards? Why not playing cards? There's something here. It's us as a collective seeking our way back to alignment with our highest guidance. So that's where we are on the planet, and that's a very exciting thing. Now, I want to move from that. That's what I prepared, and we'll see if anything comes up about trusting ourselves. Oh yeah, there's one other thing. I was called today. It was so interesting. I had a little window of time, and I came across this woman who was looking at cults. And any spiritual teacher right now, even as sort of small as me with a small community, someone who gets triggered will accuse you of being a cult leader. It's a very interesting thing. So the cult is the antithesis of what we're talking about here. And I'm not going to get into the description. People have studied this very carefully. You can look very specifically at what the criterion for a cult is. But this is the antithesis, because basically a cult wants to get you to be in groupthink, control your behaviors, your ideas, your information, all of that stuff. That's the opposite of trusting ourselves as we embody our deepest truths. And the argument against that self-trust is, oh, are you talking about, it's either, oh, you're a cult leader because you're teaching people something that's spiritual, or, oh, you're talking about anarchy, that everybody should just do their own thing and it'll just be crazy anarchy, which comes from that third dimensional consciousness that is a consciousness disconnected from love as God energy, not love as in I love you, but the love of the heart that opens to the remembrance of our divinity. Because when we really have that consciousness, we know that that which we do to the least of our sisters or brothers, we do unto ourselves, because we're all one. And in that way, our ability to trust ourselves and embody and walk in the world with our deepest truths is by its nature loving and therefore not harming or chaotic to others. Sometimes people have to go their own ways because they're not in resonance with each other's deepest truths, but that doesn't preclude that, the world's going to go crazy if everyone does their own thing. The world is going crazy because not only is there the ascension madness going on, but because of indoctrinating ideology by very clever manipulators that are triggering and actually indoctrinating at such a young age people to never have access to trusting their own inner guidance. And that is crazy making ultimately, because we feel ultimately disconnected from our God source, our God light, our divinity. Okay, so let's take a breath. Cup of tea, sip of tea. Okay, so I would like to shift a little bit now into the piece about embodiment. Okay, feeling safe enough for the soul to embody. This is the first piece that I want to tease out, or the second piece I want to tease out here. If we've had a lot of trauma in this life and sometimes in others, that creates fragmentation of the psyche. And that fragmentation creates dissociation, or an inability to land in the body, to be present in our consciousness and in our bodies. So while everything is mind and we are ultimately consciousness having a dream of separation, these dream bodies, nonetheless, these are the vehicles we walk in. So if we disassociate from them and we don't care for them, for example, it is akin to saying, I'm a very spiritual being, or I'm very traumatized, either one or both. And I got this car, but, I don't need to change the oil. I don't need to put gas in it. I'm just going to let it run until it runs out. So we have these vehicles, and to care for them and to embody into them is a part of this journey when we are healed and whole. So I've known two women in my life who, when they were younger, before they healed their trauma, literally walked through life observing themselves from over here. It's a little hard to imagine. One of them was my astrology teacher. So much fragmentation and trauma over so many incarnations that she literally could not come in and look through her own eyes. She was out here somewhere. It wasn't safe to come in. And I think it's valuable for us as priestesses to recognize, and healers and guides and lights in a dark place right now, to recognize that there may be many others out there right now who are so traumatized and dissociated that they can't land in their bodies to be present. And so, of course, trusting their inner guidance is not going to be top of their agenda. So, and that may be the case for you, or it could have been in the past where you have this experience. So just being born into this world, let us remember, is a kind of trauma, especially depending on when you were born. Like 1965, Dr. Spock let the baby cry itself to sleep, pull it out with forceps, slap it, and, cut the umbilical cord and start sticking it with needles. So, but not only that physical thing, but this experience of believing we are separate from God. Even though we're never really separate, that's just a dream. It is an experience of trauma. So for most of us, psychospiritual healing and awakening is needed. It's part of our journey. For those of us straddling these worlds, that is part of our journey. And it is my deepest belief that we are doing this because the ones to come won't need, or so that, and because the ones that want to come into a higher frequency won't need to do that anymore. It's what we picked, and we can go down rabbit holes as to why. It's one of my favorite topics, but there's more to cover in this call today, so I don't want to go too far down that. But we are here to heal and awaken from any of the psychospiritual trauma, from past incarnations, from this one, from life experiences, so that we can be the light, so that we can receive and trust our guidance, so that we can embody our deepest truths. And no matter what kind of pressure is around us to conform to something that doesn't align, we can stand strong and firm in our truth. And this, of course, requires that we do our shadow work. And again, another beautiful topic to dive deep into that we can only touch on today. But I'll just kind of summarize it a little here. Shadow work is a way of clearing ourselves of trauma, of unloving beliefs, or bringing to the light of consciousness whatever is hidden from our awareness of our psyches, in order to sufficiently love ourselves up enough to stop judging ourselves. So, or being traumatized. So what's in the shadow isn't always bad and trauma, although, that's there too. A lot of times what's in the shadow are the things we deny about ourselves. So for example, one time I had a priestess mentee who she wanted to sing. She had a beautiful voice and she dreamed of being on the stage, but she never let herself do that. She had all kinds of stories that came from her mom, from her culture, from everything that said, like, you just don't do that. You get a job, you pay your bills, you buy a house, the usual, right? The usual formula. That was in her shadow. Her most brilliant, inspired, and inspiring gifts were in the shadow. And so our work together was to help her come out of that and bring this songbird out of her and to celebrate that in herself. So stuff gets hidden in the shadow for a variety of reasons. And what it does is it clogs up the system, just a little bit like, the shaking dirt jar that I talked about yesterday. So the shadow work is important. It helps us as we love up in frequency, those aspects of ourself that had been hidden before. We clear them out of the system so that we can become more clear, more open, more of a vessel, more of a hollow bone, to use a shamanic phrase. And we also stop judging ourselves because we recognize, actually there's other work that is good to do to stop judging ourselves. We can see trauma in our lives and clear it and still be really judgmental of ourselves. So stopping from relinquishing our impulse to judge ourselves is a major part of being able to trust ourselves. And that means we have to hear it. And so that's often in the shadow. The things you're thinking when you don't think you're thinking might be the voice of a parent or an adult when you were a child telling you how bad or wrong you were, or stupid, or whatever it was. So these things need to come to the surface to be cleared. And we often need to do this with counselors or therapists. And I realize that I'm speaking to the choir of many of you here, but I feel this is important to get on record for all those sisters, and for all of us to recognize, we're all a work in progress. And the more that we heal and love ourselves up in frequency, the more we can trust ourselves. Okay. And the more we can lift as we rise as well. So we uplift others, which is the model of the new world we're straddling and moving into. Okay, so that's the next piece. So I'm going to pause here for a moment. And if anyone has any comments or reflections, I'm going to have a peek at the chat as I take a sip of my tea. And you can add anything into the chat now while it's present for you for us to go over later.
There's 2 questions. I've just marked them with question marks.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Good.
Elaine asked, do you think this full moon tomorrow is shining a light on this theme of distraught? Because the last 24 hours, I'm really feeling this theme of distrusting the heart-led path I am on. Wow, so intense. So thank you so much for this transmission.
Oh, okay. This is a really great question. And let me just tune in for a moment. Oh. So actually, you know what? I'm going to just go super quick here because, of course, I've got my astrology chart up. So yeah, so we have the moon will be in Sagittarius, opposite the sun in Gemini. So I'll just say this because this is a big possible exploration. Sagittarius is the truth seeker. That arrow pointing up. I want to see the highest possible truth. And Gemini, which is ruled by Mercury, is the twins. It's day-to-day conversation. And it can also be lies, just forked tongue, double speak. So there is a tensional pull with the sun in Gemini and the moon in Sagittarius. What is true? What is the truth? And am I just deluding myself? Because we also have, let me see, what is that? We also have Saturn. Is Saturn squaring this? Saturn is squaring this. So Saturn wants to see, show me the money. What is it? There was what is it? I'll believe it when I see it kind of thing. So there's a lot to potentially unpack there. And then the next thing is what's influencing your chart, because if you're really feeling this wobbliness around trusting yourself, my guess is that either the sun, the moon, Saturn, or some other planet like Neptune and Pisces right now could be actually some way activating your personal planets. So it's a great question. Thank you for that. And yeah.
Yeah, there's Ruth asks, love to have advice on how to get into shadow work and any guides to point us to.
Yeah, great question. There's so many people who can help you with that. So let me just tune in for a minute. I'm going to say this later. I have it later on my outline here, but I feel that one of the greatest tools for healing ourselves at a deep, deep level, healing our minds, retraining our minds, and healing our minds so that we can recognize love's presence is the Course in Miracles. A Course in Miracles is what it's really called, ACIM. And going through, at least begin with the 365 days of lessons. And it's an uncanny, interesting thing because it's a gentle, you're going in with the Holy Spirit, with the divine guide that comes with us in our dream of separation, to explore what's really beneath the surface of your consciousness. So to me, that's number one. There's also like literally someone who wrote the book on shadow work is the late Debbie Ford. You can look that book up and learn more about the shadow. Another excellent book is called Dispelling Wetiko. Wetiko is a Native American, I believe, term, I think it's Wetiko. Dispelling Wetiko is the Native term for ego insanity. So the ego is the aspect of the mind that's split from God, split from our higher consciousness, that creates all kinds of chaos, but also is part of what holds what's in the shadows, holds it down for us not to deal with. So those are a few things. Please, we've got some wise women here. Because I'm not prepared on the spot to answer fully for that, please feel free, sisters. If you have more resources on that, go ahead and add them there. Of course, radical forgiveness. Lori's expertise is another resource. And if you've got deep trauma, spiritual psychotherapy, find a good spiritual psychotherapist. And you can reach out to Lori if you want a recommendation, because I at least know a couple of powerful priestess sisters that I could recommend to you for that kind of work if you want to go deep like that. Any other questions right now, Lori, before I?
Yeah, one more. Destiny asks, is there any advice you could give me related to bringing all of my mental, body, psyche into now?
Yeah, it's a process and a progression. I would say the things that I've just shared for sure, meditation, like the kind of the usual suspects, breathing, meditation. And I'm going to actually, this is a perfect segue, Destiny, because you were the next, what you brought forward yesterday is the next topic I wanted to cover, because it does weave into today's subject. And maybe this will unpack that request for you a little more. So the first thing I want to say is thank you, sister, so much for your willingness to share yesterday. That was a deeply vulnerable share, because it does open up a very important topic that may serve many others. So that's what we're going to go into now. And I want to just take another sip of my tea here. I didn't put licorice in my tea today, so my throat needs a little more moisture. I find licorice coats my throat more for speaking a lot. Okay. So I'm going to start broad and we're going to narrow in here. Darkness, meaning shadow material in your unconscious, fear, anxiety, entity attachments, negative alien agenda, negative human agendas, all of that stuff that's the stuff that's hidden in the shadows. Darkness is not the opposite of light. Darkness is dispelled by light. Really take this in now. Think of the analogy of turning on a light in a dark room. Darkness doesn't battle the light. Darkness is gone by the light. It's a perfect illustration of the soul's awakening from a nightmare of negative energies. This is why I feel, Destiny, when you were speaking and asking yesterday, I was just praying inside myself, Mother, show me what to say, what to offer here, and to remind you and to remind all of us, the light of God is within us. The light of Divine Mother, Holy Spirit, the great mystery, our great creator, however you want to call that, is within us. We are the light. We are the children of the One. And it is that light, when we develop spiritual practices that tune us into our own God light, that we dispel darkness, that we unify our consciousness. Now, because we have lived mistaught completely about who we are and what we are, experienced lots of trauma in this and in other incarnations, live in a society and a planetary culture deeply steeped in separation, hate, attack, and fear. We have a lot of consciousness fragmentation. And in the old Piscean age, we looked to a savior, a guru, a teacher, a cult leader. But we are coming into an age now where it is not about the messenger. It is about the message. It is about us turning within, getting help when we need it, definitely getting help when we need it. Do I need someone who does entity removal because I just feel this monkey on my back that's constantly gnawing at my mind and telling me how awful I am or terrorizing me? Maybe I need that. Do I need a psychotherapist? Do I need insight from a tarot reader or an astrologer to understand more the patterns that I develop in my life? Do I need a spiritual practice that allows me to have a safe sanctuary for my consciousness? I would say usually somewhere in your life, yes to all of those different things. The key is to not outsource our sovereignty in any way, shape, or form, not to anyone, not to me, not to any other spiritual teacher you're inspired by. It's within you. We are messengers, and you too are a messenger, you meaning all of the sisters here, at times in your way. So lining up really is about turning on the light of God within us. And that may require some work. Okay, so that leads me into this. I just want to go a little bit into this thing about, we're almost done here. I have a few more points to make, and then we're going to go into the wisdom sharing, or we're going to go into the channel transmission and then the sharing. So some of us, turns out, were born with negative entity attachments. I was actually born with one, which kept me shooting myself in the proverbial foot all of my life. And creating a lot of unnecessary suffering and karma for myself and the people around me. And it wasn't until I worked with someone, and it was very easy to do, that was removed. And I began to I began to become aware of my guidance, the spiritual tools available to me, the Course in Miracles, the things that brought me to the next level of being able to be where I am right now in terms of the happiness quality of my life, the congruence of my body, mind, spirit, my actions and my words. Not that I got it all figured out, I don't, but that was a key piece for me. Not everyone has this, but some people do. Or some people have an entity that gloms onto them at some point because their frequency has gone so low from fear or trauma, addiction, or self-loathing. So I'm curious if anyone has ever had this experience, has had a negative entity attachment that you're aware of. Write it in the chat, or you can do, Sister Speaks for Me if you want. I'm not looking right now at that screen, but there's some argument that some people may say that's not actually true. But here's what I want to say about that. Couple things. We don't need to be married to low frequency energies for the rest of our lives, whether we believe it's a negative entity or just the patterning of low frequency consciousness, which was what I was born into, a patterning of very low frequency, very judgmental, very self-loathing consciousness in the milieu of my family, extended family and neighborhood, etc. as well. But sometimes we have to have a clearing. And I definitely don't mean smudging here, sisters. Smudging is not, I'm talking about when we have really energies that have glommed onto us that they laugh at, so to speak, at smudging. I'm talking about someone who knows how to remove entities. And that may be a part of what we need to do before we can rise up. Then once we do our clearing or congruent or, at the same time with that, it's really about us doing our spiritual work. And then it's up to us to love light or God light our way to a frequency above which entities cannot follow. So again, think about the idea of us straddling worlds. Some of us were born into very dense, very karmically heavy, very traumatizing family lineages, and perhaps lifetimes of that sort of patterning. So we may need help to even be able to straddle enough to start to do our spiritual work so it's effective. So raising our frequency can be done. Now, I want to say it's not necessary ultimately. Raising our frequency can be done without this kind of, entity clearing. Just as any healing can be a miracle performed by the self through a change in consciousness. Because ultimately, everything is mind, and ultimately, we are the creators, albeit unconsciously, of all we experience. And we are the children of a loving God. However, I think it's important for us to remember that we were born in this deeply steep 3D consciousness. So we're not yet masters. We are not yet Christed in our consciousness. So we may benefit greatly from support if and when needed. So this is a kind of a long way to answer your question, Destiny, which is, how do we unify? We love up our frequency and we get the help we need to do that. So my recommendation, if there's anyone who needs entity clearing, is my brother friend, Herman Petrick, whom I've referred many people to successfully. I've only heard one complaint once, and I do have to say that this was from someone that felt very much like she was in a such a victim state that she wasn't also doing her own work. So there's Herman's email address, and it's just for those who listen later and don't see this, it's Herman Petrick, HermanPetrick.com. HermanPetrick.com. You can tell him I referred you. He's worked with many of my clients and sister friends and brother friends. And then, of course, my number one recommendation for the ongoing means of raising our frequency is A Course in Miracles. Although there are many paths, but for the Western mind in particular, the Course in Miracles was brought forward. It's the original non-dual teachings of Jesus. And it's the practice of forgiveness and the training of the mind. And our sister here, Mary Woods, is I would say, the expert in that arena. So if you want to know more about that, actually, I'm taking a class with her right now. So you can find out from her. You can reach out to her, private message her here in the group. So it's two-pronged. Get clear as we do the work to raise our frequency. And this is really how we can embody our deepest truths rather than waver in uncertainty when Spirit calls us to rise to the next level, which is exactly what's happening on Earth right now. We are being pressurized in a way to rise to the next level of consciousness. And so that trust in our guidance is essential. And it takes practice. It takes training wheels. It takes, perhaps playing around with the tarot or a pendulum to double check what your guidance is as you build your confidence. And it takes clearing enough of the shadow, enough of the trauma in order to really be an open receptor for your higher guidance.